So exactly a month ago, around the 7th of October, the Canadian Immigration Minister dropped a bombshell, something that most students in Canada have been waiting for. And this was that post 15th of November, the Canada immigration system is going to allow international students who have at least the permit to work off campus to be able to work for more than 20 hours a week. So basically, post 15th of November, the limit of 20 hours a week was going to be lifted. And as an international student, you can work as many hours as you want without any issues. This new measure was basically aimed at addressing the historic labor shortage in Canada. Canadian employers have been facing unprecedented problems with filling roles in their companies. With nearly 1 million job vacancies and labor shortage at an all-time high, the economy had to turn to immigration to at least fill this particular labor shortage. So international students were going to be key in filling this particular gap that has currently been existing, with nearly over 500,000 international students currently in Canada who at least have the potential to work additional hours. This temporary change could have a huge impact on the labor market. This also reflects how important international students are to the Canadian economy. In fact, even research has shown that immigration was going to be critical in filling this current labor shortage and filling essential jobs. So basically, the new change was that between the 15th of November 2022 to 31st of December 2023, any international students who have the authorization to work off campus can now work as many as they want without having to limit themselves to the existing 20 hours that existed before. So basically, any student who has the right to work off campus, now you can pick up as many shifts as you want without at least compromising your chances when it comes to getting permanent residence or even citizenships in the future. And also, any foreign national who had his at least application with the IRCC before that Friday, the 15th of November, also qualify for this as long as the application is approved. Before, the students were limited to working only 20 hours off campus, even though if they decide to pick up a job on campus, they can work as many hours as they want. And this restriction was only lifted only during breaks and semester breaks, like maybe during the summer or even the winter breaks. However, with the cost of living currently rising, many students were advocating for this 20 hours limit to be lifted, so that they will be allowed to work as many hours as they want to be able to afford to at least work and study in Canada when they get here. Canada has been facing record high inflation, and it has been affecting almost everybody across the country. International students were the ones that were mostly hit more because they had to possibly convert their foreign currencies to the Canadian currency to be able to afford to pay their tuition and also living expenses. So basically now they have to spend more foreign currencies to be able to afford to live in Canada. And also when it comes to paying for things like tuition fee, international students ends up paying as much as 3 times the amount that residents have to pay. So this new measure was going to give international students at least the chance to earn more money to pay for their tuition and living expenses. Canada is a popular destination when it comes to making a decision to study abroad. And Canadian universities offer quality education, which ends up sometimes being cheaper than other countries like the US. So when it comes to making a decision to study abroad, most students always end up choosing Canada over US when their options are limited to just Canada and the US. Last year alone, the Canadian immigration system issued over 450,000 study permits. And this year, they are on course to exceed that number again to hit a record high number. So with this new change, one debate that had always existed among international students, be it potential and existing students, was brought back to the front. And this was, can you actually afford to pay yourself through education in Canada while studying and working as an international student? And this applies whether you decide to work full-time or part-time, because now there's no limit on the number of hours that you can work off campus as an international student. So that means you are not limited to the 20 hours. So basically, you can choose whether to do 20 hours as a part-time employee, or you go for the 40 hours or more as a full-time worker. And all this is allowed as long as you are still a student, which means you don't have to compromise your education at the expense of working to make money. When this was announced, I saw a lot of potential students in forums that I found myself in jubilating, because to them, their prayers were answered, and now they can package their proof of funds when they decide to put in their study permit application. And when it's approved, they will work as a students to pay themselves through education without recourse to any form of external funding. So their plan was, I will get to Canada, work, pay my tuition fee, find money to pay for my expenses, and possibly save to pay for the next year's tuition fee, without having to come to Canada with any form of funding. One thing that I've come to realize is that some people listen to and watch other people's videos of them claiming to come to Canada, work and pay themselves through education without asking any further questions. And they forget that when it comes to this kind of things, everybody's situation is different. And they base their decisions on these videos, package the application, get it approved, get to Canada, only to find themselves stranded and find out that the reality is different from what actually they were told. And I've heard multiple of these stories and met a couple of people who find themselves in this situation. And most times it becomes an issue because you now have to find a way to help them out, because they found themselves in the foreign land where there is no other help coming from anywhere. And sometimes when you reach out to family and friends, all they can tell you is find a way to help them, because we don't want them to come back home empty-handed. And what most people fail to realize is tuition fees is just one aspect of the amount of money that you need to be able to at least live and survive in Canada as an international student. There are other things that you need to pay for when you get here. From my experience, when it comes to studying in Canada, there are 3 major expenses that you have to plan for, because you will incur them, and these are basics that you cannot dodge in any way. The first one is tuition fee, and that one can cost you between $5,000 to up to $25,000 a year. And this is dependent on the school that you pick, the course that you pick, and even the province that you decide to go and study in. The second one is living expenses, and that can cost you between $300 to $600 a month. And this includes your transportation, feeding, phone bill, clothing, household products, and the others. So depending on your lifestyle, you have to budget between $3,600 to up to $7,200 a year for these particular expenses. And this is not avoidable unless you don't plan to at least live when you are in Canada. Because when you get here, you need to eat, you need to pay for transportation, you need to pay for a bus fare, you need to pay for household products, you need to buy things for yourself like clothing, because the weather is going to change, and if you came here in summer, you will need to get winter clothes. If you go here in winter and you didn't bring winter clothes, you need to buy them. So all these things, you need to budget for them before you get here. The third major expense is accommodation and utilities. And basically this averages about $600 a month. That's if you decide to go for possibly sharing a 1-bedroom where you share with other roommates. Basically that's other flatmates, people that you're going to share with. But if you decide to, let's say, have a full apartment to yourself, then you pay more for this. But because it's a general discussion, we are just going with an average number of $600. That means annually you need to budget about $7,200 to cover this. And I'm assuming that $600 will include your utilities. That's your heating, your gas, and possibly hydro. And if you are lucky, some of the accommodations that you'll find yourself in, it will come with internet as part of the total fees. And anybody who is currently living in Canada will tell you that being able to cover all these with $600 a month, that means you are stretching yourself possibly to the limit. Or possibly you are lucky enough to find a very good landlord who decided not to overcharge for all these things together. So the truth is, if you can find any way to reduce any of these 3 to the bare minimum, you are going to increase the chances of you being able to at least pay yourself through studying in Canada without recourse to any external funding, because these are three major expenses that you have to budget for, and all these three you cannot avoid. So before we get into practical situations that at least you can apply to your case, so you can be well prepared before you land in Canada and not get yourself stranded, there are a few factors that I want you to pay attention to anytime you hear somebody scream that they have been able to pay themselves through studying in Canada as a student without recourse to any external funding. And when I say external funding, in this case, I'm talking about counting on money or support coming from back home or coming to Canada with some huge amount of money, at least to cushion them. I always say when it comes to this journey, no two situations are the same. So always find a way to at least customize your own situation and plan for it accordingly. Listen to people's advice, but just use it to apply it to your life and adjust accordingly. Don't just copy and paste. Now let's look at some of the factors that can influence someone being able to pay themselves through studying in Canada. The first one is, how much was their tuition fee? If your tuition fee is $15,000 a year and someone's tuition fee is $5,000 a year, and the person is telling you that he was able to pay his tuition fee by just working as a student, then you have to take this with a pinch of salt, because the two of you are basically starting on different levels right from the word go. Number two is, was the person on any form of funding or scholarship? And this mainly applies to people who are taking research programs. Sometimes they are offered scholarships that goes a long way to cut down on one of these three expenses. Sometimes they might have their tuition fee being waived off, or sometimes it comes with extra funding to support the accommodation. So if somebody who got scholarship to study in Canada is telling you that I was able to pay myself through studying in Canada, then you have to wise up, because this person didn't even pay tuition fee, or his tuition fee was actually refunded to him when he landed in Canada, and all he needed to do was just go to school, study, get paid, and sometimes they will even go looking for a job because they already have a job as a teaching assistant or a research assistant. Number three is, did he pay his first semester tuition fee or a full year tuition fee before landing in Canada? I'm saying this because it depends on whether you paid part of your tuition fee or full year tuition fee before you landed in Canada. Your stress level is always different. And I've seen this with lots of people. Most people who pay their tuition fee before landing here, it's like they have some amount of cushion. They don't have to worry about getting bulk sum to pay their tuition fee the first year, because it has already been paid for. So they are able to relax, look for a job, or possibly experiment with some other jobs until they find something that they are comfortable with. And those who land here without paying their tuition fee and come here empty-handed, they have to quickly now be running around finding ways to raise that tuition amount to pay for their tuition fee so that they can continue to be a student and be in Canada. And if that money doesn't come about, then it becomes an issue. So depending on whether the person paid his first semester tuition fee or first year tuition fee before landing here, the stress level will be different. And sometimes some people will pay their first year tuition fee and they will be working to make money to pay for next year's tuition fee. And if such person is screaming he paid himself through studying in Canada, then take it with a pinch of salt, because he came here with some amount of cushion. Number four is, which province are you going to? As we will see when we start getting into practical situations, you will see that different provinces have different minimum wage, and different provinces have different tax system, and different provinces have different standard of living. And sometimes that difference of $2 in minimum wage can actually make a difference in whether you can afford to make enough to pay yourself through studying in Canada or not. So when it comes to choosing a province, you have to choose wisely. At least do enough research before you settle in a school. Don't say just because a friend of mine went there and was able to at least make it, I can also make it there. Do your own research. Factor number 5 is, how much money are you coming to Canada with? If someone came with $10,000 in their account after paying their tuition fee, and you are coming with just $500 in your wallet, then you are already on a different level, because your stress level is going to be different. The truth is, there are a lot of expenses that you will need to incur right after you land in Canada, and you will need to pay for these expenses out of pocket. After even securing an accommodation, they will ask you to pay for at least a 1-month security deposit. After getting that accommodation, you will need to pay for furniture, at least a mattress that you can sleep on in that room, then basic amenities that can help you to survive. And all this will be paid out of pocket even before you land your first job. So if you are coming here with just $500 in your pocket, then you have to know that your stress level is going to be different from someone who came here with $10,000 in their pocket. And the funny thing that I've grown to see is that those who actually need a job, when they land in Canada, sometimes it's very difficult finding a job. And those who land here, possibly with some amount of comfort, not prepared to at least look for a job the first couple of weeks or months, always end up landing jobs faster. It is like the joke that we always talk about when we're back in Ghana, that it's most times difficult to find a job when you are unemployed. But when you are employed, it's like everybody will be looking for you to give you a job. And last but not the least is, did their friends or family offer them free accommodation when they landed in Canada? If this is the case, then you have to know that it's like a third of their expenses for studying in Canada has just been waived off. It's like getting a scholarship to study in Canada. So sometimes when you hear some of these people screaming, I paid myself through studying in Canada, and that person actually got free accommodation because he or she had family and friends in Canada who were prepared to host him or her, but you don't have that privilege, and you have to find your own accommodation and pay for your expenses, then you have to know that your cost of studying in Canada are going to be different. So the amount of money you need to make to at least pay yourself through studying in Canada is going to also be different. But today, what I'm going to do is less talking and we'll do more practical work. Like my friend Max Holloway always says, numbers don't lie. People lie, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie. So today, we'll just run some numbers that you can easily apply to your life and see and plan accordingly before you land in Canada. So that even though you package your application, when you get here, at least you can reduce your stress level and be able to survive when you are here. So for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to look at 3 different scenarios, and we'll look at people who are going to 3 different provinces. And in terms of the provinces, I'm picking 3 of them, and these will be Ontario, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. I picked Saskatchewan because they have the minimum wage, Ontario because most people go there, and British Columbia because they have the highest minimum wage. Before we get into it, now let's look at some numbers here. In terms of minimum wage, you realize that if you're going to Alberta, it's going to be $15 an hour. If you look at it, you realize that British Columbia has the highest minimum wage, while Saskatchewan has the minimum at $13 an hour. But one thing that most people don't pay attention to is also the taxes. So depending on which province that you are going to, you'll be paying you'll have different form of tax that you have to also account for. In Canada, there are 3 different taxes that you are going to experience. The first one is GST and HST. GST is the taxes that you pay on goods and services. So any amount of money that is coming into your pocket, there will be some amount of tax on it. Then there's the PST. This is normally the provincial sales tax. So you realize that in terms of the tax system, not every province at least has all 3. Some of them have PST, others have the GST, others have the HST. But what we'll be working with the total tax rate that will apply to the amount of money that you make. Unless you decide that you're going to do a cash job where the money will come straight into your hands and wouldn't be paid straight into your bank account, which will be illegal anyways. So at least, depending on which province that you are going to, you know how much the minimum wage is. Alberta is 15, British Columbia is 16.65, Manitoba is 13.5, New Brunswick is 13.75. So what I've done with this sheet is, now on this side, I've put in all the minimum wage for every province. And on this side, there are the taxes that you end up paying in the long run. Then on this sheet, I've customized it such that depending on which province that you are going to, when we select the province, the respective minimum wage and taxes will be applied after you've inputted the number of hours that you want to do. So let's get into some numbers here. So first things first, so we pick Saskatchewan here as the province that we are going to. See that automatically the minimum wage is adjusted here. And I put some notes here on about the minimum wage in case you want to read about it. Then in terms of expenses, the yellow ones are basically the things that you can adjust yourself so that the calculation will be done automatically for you. And I've done this for you so you don't have to redo it yourself. I will share this particular sheet so that you can download and do your own calculation. So you prepare accordingly before you land. So we assume here somebody who is paying 15,000 Canadian dollars as tuition fee annually, and this money will be taken up front. So you have to plan for it. Then we assume a rent of $600, mobile phone bill of $35, and the funny thing is, if you are in Canada, $35, you are getting just only voice. You are not even getting data. Even if you get data, you get about 500 MB. So you have to be mindful of that. So this is like the bare minimum plan that you can be on. Then utilities here, I'm assuming things like phone bill, other things, home internet, and all other things being in there. We assume about $75. A bus pass of $40. Then food, I'm assuming $150 here. So basically, for your groceries, your eating out, and all those things, we are assuming $150 here. Then now, when you come to the gross income, the assumption that I'm making here is there are 24 hours in a day. I'm assuming that you want to be fully rested. So you will spend 6 hours at least sleeping. Then you will spend 2 hours at least commuting because you are here and possibly you are busing. You will spend 1 hour to bus to your work and 1 hour to bus back. That's 2 hours of busing in a day. Then also because you are a student, you will need to go to school. You will need to do your assignment. So I'm assuming that you will spend 8 hours in a day at least on school. So that's at least sitting in class and doing your assignments. So if you add up to the other 8 hours, then that means 16 hours of your day is actually gone. And 24 minus the 16, you will be left with 8 hours to work in the day. So even though you've been allowed to work as many hours as you want, the truth is you are not a robot. There's a limit to how much hours you can actually work in a day. And I'm assuming rest on Sunday because you cannot overwork yourself without falling sick or at least your body breaking down. So I'm assuming that you decide to pick one day to rest, and we are picking one day in this case to rest, which is Sunday. So when it comes to the hours, I'm assuming in total you want to do 40 hours in a week. So that 40 hours has been broken down over the 6 days that you can work. Out of that total week, you will make around $520. A month, you are making around $2,080 because you are working 80 hours on a $13 minimum wage. Annually, that will add up to about $27,560. So depending on the province that this person is going to, Saskatchewan, the tax that will be taken out weekly will be $57, monthly will be $229, and annually will be $3,000. That means their net income every month will now be around $1,851, and annually will be $24,528. If we now take out the expenses that the person incurred, which was $25,800, now that person is already down by $1,272, even after working 40 hours in a week. And if the person is possibly studying for more than a year course, that means at the beginning of the year 2, they need to come up with another $15,000 to pay for their tuition fee. So now they're already down $1,272. If you add that to the $15,000 that they need to come up with, they are now down about $16,272. Now this is for someone going to Saskatchewan. Let's assume for the same scenario, that person decides not to go to Saskatchewan, but decides that I'm going to Ontario. What we see here is for the same expenses, that person ends up with how much? $2,788 at the end of the year. And if the person decides to go to British Columbia, he ends up with $3,397. So how can this person reduce his expenses and possibly end up being able to pay himself through studying in Canada. You realize that one of the major expenses that the person is incurring here is tuition fee. Now, if you decide to change the tuition fee to $10,000 here, what happens? At the end of the year, the person is left with about $8,000. That means he can cut down on other expenses and be able to afford tuition, and he'll be down by 1,000. It's better to be down by 1,000 to be down by 16,000 that we saw earlier. However, if the tuition fee is now 5,000, what happens? Now this person is able to pay himself through studying in Canada, because at the end of the year one, he's left with 13,387. And after paying his tuition fee of 5,000, he's still left with about 8,387 to spare. I don't know whether you see it here. So just changing the tuition fee, see how much it has changed the person's ability to pay himself through studying in Canada. Now let's apply the same scenario to the person going to Ontario. He's still left with 7,000 at the end of the year. If that person is going to Saskatchewan, he's still left with 3,000 at the end of year one. So as you can see from this sheet, just changing your tuition fee can actually make a difference. And sometimes the province that you are going to also has an impact on how much money you can save in the long run. In this particular scenario, I'm assuming the person is working full-time, which is 40 hours every week. So basically, the person is working himself to the bone to be able to make money to pay himself through school. And I'll leave a link to this Excel sheet in the description column, so you can go there and at least download and also check for yourself. You can input the tuition fee that you are going to pay for the school that you are going to, and also put some assumptions for the cost that you are going to incur for the other things that are labeled there. Then you can easily adjust the hours and see how much hours you need to make to be able to pay yourself while studying. So my advice is, if funds is an issue for you and you still want to study in Canada, there are a few changes that you need to do to at least make it easy for you to pay yourself through studying in Canada with your peace of mind and not be stressed when you get to Canada. One, at least have your first semester tuition fee or full year tuition fee paid off before you even fly out of your home country, because that will give you peace of mind. Two, consider borrowing from the 3Fs that anybody who has started business will tell you to borrow from. And these 3Fs are friends, family, and fools, to at least finance your education for the first year. And you can speak to these people that you pay them back after a year in Canada, so that you can have your peace of mind and relax when you get here and not be rushed or stressed when you start studying. 3, consider the option of staying with a family or friend if that's available to you, because it will go a long way to cut down on your expenses when you get to Canada. 4, consider borrowing from institutions that possibly empower to finance your education. And this is not a sponsored video, but I've seen people who are even working and making their own money still go ahead and borrow from Empower to study in Canada and pay it off later post-graduation. And that gave them their peace of mind when they were students. 5, look for external sponsorships or scholarships from your institution that you'll be studying in, if that is available to you, because it will also help you to cut down on your expenses. 6 is to pick your province wisely, because it can easily impact how much money you make and how much tax you make, and even the cost of living when you are in Canada. 7 is to choose your course wisely. If migration is your ultimate goal and you are not basically here to study to be in academia, then you should choose your course wisely. At least pick a course that has a lower tuition fee, so that you don't have to work to spend most of your money paying your tuition fee, and you can easily pay yourself through studying in Canada without any recourse to external funding. So with the news change that has been introduced, this is my advice of what to do if you actually want to be able to pay yourself through studying in Canada without any recourse to external funding or even compromising your studies when you get here. And if you got value out of this video, kindly hit the subscribe button to join this family as we learn together on this journey. And don't forget to hit the like button so YouTube will see value in this video and suggest it to other people who will need it. And kindly share this video to family and friends who also need it. Till the next video, catch you.